Old stories like long lost friends, rodeos and late night bends, history before our time, round pens and pasture rides, Cowboys of the Osage.
Howdy, everyone. Welcome to the Cowboys of the Osage podcast, brought to you by the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum right here in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. Good to have you along with us. And no, this is not old Cody tonight. This is old Charlie sitting in here along with my co-host, Jimbo Snively, rodeo historian and a good friend of our guest today. How are you doing today, Jimbo?
Oh, Charlie, just another great day in Osage, man.
Well, tell us about our guest. This is more than special tonight.
Yeah, you know, Charlie, people have been watching these podcasts for quite a while, and some of them might not know Cody or his background, you know, and he comes from a long line of cowboys, and nobody's got more of a Western heritage background than Cody on both sides of his family, you know, and his dad was a great roper. His grandfathers on both sides were horse traders and worked in the horse business, and like I say, his dad was a great roper, and he was a accomplished roper himself, and we're just going to try to tell people a little bit about him, you know, because a lot of people, I've had people ask me, what's old Cody like, you know, and stuff, and so we're going to tell them all about him today.
Well, I'm just honored to be here, and I will say this, I consider him a very good friend, and I'm very proud to be his friend. But last week I was listening to a podcast, and I thank the Lord put this on my heart, because he said, we need to do this tonight. We need to get Cody down, let people know more about him and who he is. So I called Cody. I said, Cody, I've got an idea, and you're not going to like it. And he said, what is that? I said, we're going to do a podcast. I'm going to host it with Jimbo, and you're going to be the guest. He said, no, I don't like it, but whatever you want to do.
I was real excited until they told me the guest part.
Right.
You're right. So we're going to start back. Jimbo already talked about it, but you have such a heritage in the Western way of life, rodeo, the horse business, all tying in with ties one way or other to the ranch life. So I want to visit a little bit about your heritage back there, especially you had granddads on both sides that were in the horse business. I guess we could call them horse dealers or horse traders. It depends on what part of the country you're from.
Yeah, I would consider them horse traders for sure, Charlie. Yeah, my great granddad, I never met him, but I've always heard a lot of stories about him, and I've always heard he was a big horse trader in his day. So, and I brought you a little article that I just got in the mail the other day from my folks that you know validated some of those points that I was told all my life anyway.
Absolutely. In fact, that article, I had no idea that back in the days that there was that many horses handled where you'd go to and sell and buy 100 or 200 horses at one horse sale, or ship carloads of horses to. But I did sell him a horse one day back in the 60s at the Woodward horse sale. Back they run it from the 20s up through the 70s or 80s once a month out there. So, and he was always there, being from Elk City, Oklahoma.
Yeah, it always amazed me how he got around back in those days, because I don't know, because, you know, it was in the early days, and he was headed to Clovis, New Mexico to the horse sale one day, and then he was backtracking right back to Fort Smith, Arkansas to the sale, and, you know, I always wondered how they made all those miles, you know, back then.
They was tough, and they didn't sleep a lot. And no, they had to be. And one time, a few years ago, I had the honor of visiting with cowboy legend Boots O'Neill, and he told me he was at the Matador then, and your granddad had come down there and buy broke horses or old horses or reject horses, but he talked about dealing with your granddad down there, and this was many decades ago.
Yeah, he actually worked with my other granddad, my dad's dad, they're at the Matador ranches. They were both employed there at the same time.
So they crossed paths back then.
Yes, sir, and they're old friends.
Wow.
Right up until the day my granddad died. They worked there. In fact, my granddad had one of the only known chuck wagons from the Matador Ranch. It was his own personal chuck wagon until he sold it a few years ago before his death.
Well, wow. That's so interesting to me because I didn't know those ties. You go back that many generations, goes right back into the legendary ranching business, and so you're just born and bred to have this love for the Western lifestyle.
Oh, for sure. I don't know any other lifestyle, Charlie. That's for sure.
That's absolutely right. Well, then your mom's dad was also in the horse business.
Yeah, he was a big horse trader also, and for most of his life, he bought and sold many a head of horses all over the country.
Now, you knew him.
I knew him well.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
I know you did.
I traveled with him all over the country. In fact, one time we went on a run of horse sales up through the Dakotas, and he had a guy, an Amish boy, hired to drive us up there, and he'd never driven before. He was on some sort of holiday the Amish can take before they make their final commitment to the Amishhood. I'm not sure what it is. I grew up around them, but I don't know everything about their religion. So we all took off to South Dakota, and it sounds crazy, but he was playing cards with Casey Tibbs, at a horse sale there, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It's one of my greatest memories. When he wasn't horse trading, he was actually a gambler by trade. That's how he made his living. So he never answered to another man a day in his life, besides maybe a lawman or two.
Well, I want to hear a little bit more about an untrained Amish driver. How'd that work out for you?
He wanted to kill me by the time we got home. He went straight back to the Amish after riding around with us for a few weeks.
How old would you have been at that time?
I don't know, maybe 10 or 12, Charlie. Seems about that age. I vividly remember we stopped by a Western store about 7:30 in the morning, and he knocked on the back door, and the guy that owned the Western store owed him some money from a gambling debt of some sort, and I walked out of there with a brand new pair of red Roy Cooper Roper boots and a silver belly hat that day.
Wow.
I bet you is a happy little camper.
Oh yeah. Well, one time, Charlie, one time I was wanting a go-kart. Listen to this, Jimbo. I was wanting a go-kart one time. So he knew a go-kart dealer over in Wichita, Kansas that played cards. So he went over there and he gambled with this guy until he won me a go-kart right there. And we loaded the go-kart up in the back of the truck and headed home with it.
What kind of cards did they play? Do you know the game?
Probably pinochle or pitch right then. They didn't play poker during the day, it didn't seem like. If they played during the day, it was generally dominoes, which actually he was this does sound crazy reciting some of it right now, but he was named a world champion domino player 4 or 5 times in Andalusia, Alabama at the world champion domino tournament. He's won the doubles there, he's won the singles there, he's won everything there, and he's won second there numerous times, but he said that him and the guy it came down to, they decided to split the pot, and it didn't matter to him who won or lost at that point.
Right.
But I actually have one of the trophies over there from the Andalusia, Alabama world champion domino tournament that he played in.
Wow.
And actually, at one time, I don't know, it was like 15, 20 years ago, at least 20 years ago, that a professional domino association popped up, and a guy recruited him to be in the association. They ran it sort of like the poker association. I think it was on Prime Sports, one of the many sports channels out there. And he played against Samuel L. Jackson in some of those deals, and Willie Nelson. But he had already played against Willie Nelson in his early days, because he was a notorious gambler. And
how long ago was this? What time frame were we talking about?
Pretty well his whole life.
Yeah. I mean, when he was playing with those guys? Just
60s,
yeah,
70s.
60s and 70s.
Yes, sir. 80s,
Yeah.
And you
90s,
and you touch on
2000s.
you touch on the cards. That's something I don't believe that the average rodeo watcher realizes especially in the older days. I don't know about today, how much pitch was played on the road between these guys, and arm wrestling too. That was another byproduct.
They're on their phones now, probably. Yeah, but yeah, you're right. Pitch was the game of choice for Cowboys.
Yeah, it was great. I love a good 5-point pull haul pitch, cut deck.
High-low 2 jacks in the game, quarter hickey.
Yeah. We called them a spur row after a while because we made the hickeys look like a spur row on a piece of paper. Yeah, we played, about the time we left the driveway rodeoing, before cell phones, just before cell phones.
Yeah.
That's what we did. We'd start shuffling the cards. Sometimes, if you wanted to play a little more gamble to it, we'd play full deck pitch, but most of the time we cut the deck down to the 10s and up and a deuce in the deal low, and moved on fast.
What's sad about this conversation, there's a lot of young people, if they listen to it, won't have a clue what we're talking about.
Well,
and when did
we can educate them real quick?
Yeah, they did
All
learn.
they got to do is come sit around with us, and
That's right.
They'll know how to play pitch after a little while.
Right.
Now, your dad growing up in this, and of course your mother's dad, granddad traders, your dad's dad was a trader, and your dad grew up trading. At what point did your granddad said in this article you gave me to read, he didn't want to be away from home rodeoing. But at what point did your dad start deciding to hit the rodeo road?
Probably not too long after that article was written. Honestly, he's been a rodeo guy his whole life, Charlie. I've never known him to, he still rides a horse every day. He still picks up a rope every day, and
he was rodeo in college too, wasn't he?
College rodeo.
Yeah.
He was American Junior Rodeo Association champion in his younger days.
What event was he a champion in?
All around.
All around?
Yes, sir. He did every event in rodeo there for a while. That's how we got moved this direction. There was a lot of amateur rodeos that they worked called the UPRA back in the day, and he worked saddle bronc riding, team roping, calf roping on the regular, and then started adding steer roping into his deal. But I got pictures of him riding bulls and bareback riding.
You showed me a picture of him riding a bronc coming out of the chute. It's just an outstanding picture.
Yeah, bronc riding was his passion. Still is, even though he retired in 1977 from bronc riding. He broke his leg at Cheyenne, he told me, and he said our family almost starved to death until he got well, and he decided just to be a rodeo roper then, because it's so much more money and easier.
When you was growing up, say pre-10-year-olds, where was you living at that point in time?
I grew up in Hutchinson, Kansas.
Okay. And then at what point in time did you move this direction?
I was a senior in high school, and I was moving down. We were moving to McAllister, Oklahoma, to be closer to my grandparents there. And my dad bought me an old pickup, one-horse trailer. Borrowed a one-horse trailer from a guy in McAllister, actually. And I was going down there a couple weeks ahead of him to start school my senior year, and that old pickup blew up in South Haven, Kansas. I could see the Oklahoma line from there.
You wasn't pushing it a little hard, was you?
Well, heck, I didn't know. I had never even driven it before, Jimbo.
Right.
And I'm unloading my old horse, fixing to ride him into town because I can see the interstate exit right there. And I'll be a son of a gun. An old guy pulled up and asked if I needed any help. And I said, well, unless you're heading close to McAllister, Oklahoma, not going to be much help to me today, but I appreciate it. He said, well, son, I live in Hartshorn. What can I do for you? Which is only about 20 miles from McAllister. And he was driving an old pickup. And I unhooked that trailer right there, and we pulled that truck forward with the chain, and I unloaded my bags out of it, and we hooked right onto that trailer, and I haven't seen that truck since, Jimbo.
Just left it there.
I just left it there. I've never seen it since.
That's great. You know, Jimbo, I'm already convinced Cody has got to write a book one of these days.
He should.
Yes, he and gets a few more years experience at the museum business and what he's doing here for Paul Huska, then he definitely needs to. And at what point did you start pro rodeoing?
Well, I bought my permit when I was 18 years old, and I went to a few rodeos. I won 1 or 2 checks. First check, Laredo, Texas. That was a great time down there. If you've never been to Laredo, I highly encourage you to go.
Were you just steer roping,
25 years ago.
Did you do anything else?
I mainly just started focusing on steer roping. I team roped and bulldogged and roped a little bit of calves through high school.
Right.
But I always wanted to be a steer roper,
Sure.
that's for sure.
Sure.
I didn't ever see myself doing much of anything else in the rodeo world besides steer roping. But yeah, I made the national high school finals. Time or two.
And what events was that?
Team roping.
Team roping?
There for a while, I got to where I could heel pretty good, but this rodeo is a very humbling sport. But I got off that old horse I was heeling good on, and I've never really heeled that great since, Charlie.
Right.
That old booger, he'd cheat me just enough. I'd have to stand up and rope a little more correctly than if a horse that gave me a good shot. So he was just hard to dally on,
Right. And that brings up a subject for me, Cody. Then there's so many places and ways we could go in this visit here tonight. But here again, I don't think a lot of people, if they haven't not been there and done that, it's just like your interview with John Miller talked about the best head horse he had ever seen. Tommy Wayman talking about, as good a polo play horse as there was in the country. We can hear the announcers say or hear the interviews on the rodeo and how important their horse is, but until you get that great one, or that one that really fits you, that is, then you really never know how to experience it.
No, it's a special thing to find a horse that you really mesh with really good. But our biggest problem growing up is we'd get them going good, Charlie, and then we'd sell them.
Right. Let's talk about the buckskin horse your dad won so much on. Was that his best horse ever, probably?
That horse made my dad's career, that's for sure.
Yes. What was his name?
His name was Old Dutch.
Dutch, yes.
Yes, sir. He, in fact, there's a big mural at the Cowboy Hall of Fame, or not, at the American Quarter Horse Hall of Fame. Dutch is right in the middle of it over there. It's one of the most accomplished rodeo horses in history. But before Dutch, they had an old horse called Dunny that was a real good horse. My mom ended up in the top 20 in the world on him, barrel racing, and my dad made 2 national finals on him, steer roping. And that's just something you don't hear every day.
No, sir.
A husband and wife sharing it and being very competitive on that horse,
Right.
So, but Old Dutch, I was a young boy when we first got him, but my dad had rode the train, the Amtrak train, believe it or not, to La Junta, Colorado, to the horse sale. And there were some old boys from a feed yard out in western Kansas that had him there. He was broke, but just barely broke. Just kind of pull around broke, they said. But they put him in on loose because the commission was only 5% compared to 7% on a rider. And they said he brought $3,500 that day on the loose, which is a lot of money for a horse that's not being ridden or
especially in that
represented.
day and age. Yes,
they didn't want you representing a horse in on the loose, so you paid the extra 2% for that privilege. So they just did it because it's cheaper to sell him that way, and they were wanting rid of him. He brought $3,500 on the loose, and my dad sent him to my grandpa down in Clovis right then. Made sure he's good to go. And he rode him there at the sale barn there for a while, and probably taught his voice commands there at the sale barn, I would assume. And they said he was just a natural horse, just went to roping on him. And he just started hauling him and winning on him right immediately.
He was built somewhat like that train your dad rode. He was stout.
Oh, yeah. He was a once-in-a-lifetime find. That's
Yes, sir.
no doubt.
And I watched him rope on him a lot, especially at the national finals. And I think most of them was at the Lazy at the time that he was riding Dutch, I believe.
Yeah, the last year he rode Dutch right there at the national finals. He first steer kicked loose. I just watched this videotape the other day. I was playing in the bleachers somewhere, throwing mud around at other kids or something. I wasn't even watching this. And then he placed in the next 6 rounds after that. So, and then one of them is old Dutch's footing came out from under him and he fell. And he went ahead and got up and tied the steer in 14, and Dutch, he got back up on the end of it and just stood there, just like you're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the first time I'd ever seen him. You know, most horses would run away after a scare and a fall like that. But old Dutch, he just got right back up and worked just like a steer horse is supposed to.
And before we get away from your dad, how many of the Cheyenne championships did he win on Dutch? Do you know?
None.
He didn't win any of them?
No, sir.
Okay. And is he the only person to win 4 championships at Cheyenne?
Well, 2 of his championships were in the seniors, Charlie, and 2 of them were in the regular rodeo.
In the open.
In the PRCA rodeo. So you can no, there's other guys that probably have 4 Cheyenne wins, including all-around wins. You know, the Stetson Vest, he won 2 or 3 buckles just the other day.
Well, that's true.
But, you know, as far as stats at Cheyenne, it would be real interesting to go back and look. He roped there 35 times, and he probably won 35 checks. Now, one year he might have won 3 checks.
Mm-hmm,
the
sure.
next year he didn't win a check, and the next year he won a go-round and didn't win anything else. But, you know, he probably won as many checks as he did going there. So
I know he trained you, helped you. Is there any other steer ropers that had a great influence on you in your roping career?
not really.
Other than some you watched, you probably wanted to be like them a little bit.
Some of them,
Yeah.
for some reason, a little bullheaded, and I didn't want to listen to anybody else's way of doing it. So,
Right.
in hindsight, probably would have helped me out a little bit.
During your time of tripping steers, who was also going to the finals and kind of at the top of the heap during that era that you was roping?
Trevor Brazil, all the toughs. Trevor Brazil, Guy Allen, Rocky Patterson, pretty well all the toughs. Scott Snedeker. Yeah, I've just been semi-retired for 6 years now. So I think I got my PRCA card in the late 90s sometime. So from the late 90s to now. But I grew up watching all the guys from about 1984 up to when I kind of started paying attention to watching some of the runs and some of the people that we were around.
You ever thought about cracking back out?
Oh, sometimes.
All the time, every time you see somebody.
Yeah, if you're
rope
watching one, you're thinking,
Yeah.
oh my Lord.
Now, where did you rope at in the finals? What venues? Because I knew was it during the Lazy era that you was there?
Oh, heck. So my career was a typical Cowboys career, Charlie. I was a top 20 guy for several years, and had a chance to make the finals several times right up to the very last run of the year. But I never capitalized on any of that,
Okay.
which is fine.
Shoot, yeah, you had a heck of a career.
Well, I thought you had been to the finals there, but
Oh, I untied steers at the finals several times. We were in the steer business. We supplied the steers at the finals. My old man, he made the finals 9 times. So, but
how many years did you supply the steers at Cheyenne?
I think about 7 years. Some of the best times of my life.
Were they driving them from the ranch then? Were they still doing that?
Oh, it's a pretty interesting deal. I hauled all the steers up there. I'd take 3 semi-loads of steers up there and drop them off about 10 miles north of town in a great big pasture. And
Just tripping cattle, or did you have some other cattle too? Bulldogging and stuff?
team roping.
Okay, team roping.
And we helped put together some of the bulldog
Okay.
steers. I would all part of them up there too. But we'd go through 1,000 head of cattle trying to put together a set of Cheyenne steers. So what we couldn't put together in a big frame of a steer, we tried to put a lot of horn on them at least to make it a good old-timey type roping the
Right.
best we could. So I'd haul three semi-loads of cattle up there, one after another. It's a good thing that I never got pulled over or they checked any logbooks because I didn't even know anything about any of them.
Would you just haul an empty truck back and get another load? Is that how you did it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I got caught in a tornado one time on the way back with an empty trailer. And you don't want to be in an empty cattle trailer
Right.
in a tornado.
Catch a lot of wind, don't you?
Anyway, 3 semi-loads, 10 miles north of town, and then a few days before the rodeo, they turn everything out there, the bulldog and steers, the calves and everything, and they have a great big roundup. So all the, the Colorado senators and things like that, the Wyoming governor, and, all kinds of people meet there at 5 o'clock in the morning. They'll have a big chuck wagon breakfast. And I don't think they even do this anymore. I think they're bringing in the bucking horses now, which is cool. I really think that's cool.
See, this kind of information is so fascinating to me because that's stuff we never hear about.
Well, yeah, it was
thank-
always fascinating to me, the behind the scenes.
Yeah, behind the
of a lot of
scenes
this
stuff.
Absolutely.
We didn't, as Cowboys, we didn't know anything about it.
What surprised me though, they threw them all together, and then you had to sort them back out.
Yeah, so we drive them 10 miles. They shut down the interstate,
Yeah.
I-25 there, and we drive them down to the exit, where they exit to the state capitol, where you go to the Frontier Fairgrounds there. And they'd take off, through the golf course, and we'd have to go rope them off the golf course, of course. And I've heard of them jumping in swimming pools and over fences and all kind of fun stuff. And they'd drive them over there to the racetrack, and then drive them all the way around the racetrack back to the pens, and we'd sort all the different types of cattle off from each other. And then they'd put everything on full feed and hay.
And all those cinders and stuff, they probably, once they got there, they's done. They probably wasn't there for the sorting.
They were sore. I don't even know if they made it all the way in, but
But they didn't stick around for the sorting, though, did they?
oh no,
Yeah,
no, there was
that's what
only a
I mean.
handful of people.
Yeah.
At that time, couple pretty cool people were back there in charge of the pens when we first came along, and it was Brad and Shirley Churchill, which Brad was a longtime pickup man for Harry Vold, and Shirley, she was the Frontier Days lady over the pens. But after a couple of years of working with us, they got rid of everybody else who was over anything, and we just did all our own sorting from there on.
And before we move on, but where was your favorite place, or you enjoyed most to trip steers? Was it Cheyenne?
Oh yeah, it's definitely one you look forward to every year. So if you're a steer roper, Charlie, this is the ones you look forward to. You look forward to Cheyenne. Besides the nostalgia being there, you see all your old friends. And you look forward to Pecos, Texas, just because it's got such a deep history in rodeo, and they've always supported the steer ropers. So we support them, I feel like. It's a great rodeo. And Pendleton, Oregon.
Yeah, no
If you're a
doubt.
steer roper, you love those three as far as rodeos.
What makes Pendleton so special, Cody?
Well, if you're into nostalgia, if you're into the roots of rodeo and the way they've always done it, at one place, it's right there.
They haven't changed much, have they?
Very little.
Yeah.
Very little. I'd go through all those museums, like the Cheyenne Frontier Days, because we were there for so long. And growing up, you could get in for free. You could get into the carnival for free if you were a contestant or a contestant's son. Somehow, I'd take my dad's back number. They gave each family one pass to get in, And I never missed Cheyenne with my dad, for sure. So you went to the carnival, you went to the museums,
Right.
places they let you in for free.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Sure.
But the setup was different at all three of those places as far as the setup as the scores and
Oh, yeah.
the shoots had the difference in them.
until this Cowboy channel came along, I couldn't even hardly describe to people how they run Pendleton. And it never even made sense to me as a roper how they actually ran it. You know, how they brought the steers back from behind there, and the way you backed up against the announcer stand, and the right side of your box is just contestants lining the track right there, and they're all coaching you, you know. So yeah, it's I couldn't even conceive how they did some of these things until I saw them with my own eyes. And now, luckily, with the, you know, like the Cowboy channel and stuff like that, people can see how they do these things, and it's great. You know, there's nothing cooler, you know, that Pendleton. It's still run the same way. I think the chutes are actually at a different end now, which is no big deal.
But do you run down the hill there?
There's a slight incline. It used to be a pretty big one, from what I understand, and it's not near as big as it used to.
Now, like Pecos, what kind of score do they have at Pecos?
You know, it's varied through the years.
But not as long as Cheyenne.
It's 18 to 25 foot.
Okay.
At Pecos, and you know, they got a huge arena, but they don't generally rope walking fresh steers, you know, that time of year. Usually, you got an older, wiser set. So each rodeo usually had its own intangibles like that. You know, Cheyenne typically, until the last couple of years, everybody was guaranteed a walk-in fresh steer. You know, your steer might run, but you're guaranteed pretty well that, you know, no one in the United States has ran him, because we've only used, you know, Mexican origin steers for that rodeo. And they used a handful barrier, 30-foot long score, right up until the last couple of years. I think they just backed it off to 25-foot score, which still, it's not helping the Cowboy that much, besides maybe being a bulldogger there, because you're right there on that left fence. There's really nowhere to go unless you got a real game plan. And that's the reason I think so many of them older guys and guys that win a lot at Cheyenne, you know, continue to win a lot at Cheyenne, because they can must use their head, you know, in all those situations that can arise there. So
Have they moved that fence in? It just seems like it gets narrower all the time to me.
it seems like it, and I think that it probably has moved in a little bit through the years.
Makes you wonder, steer roping made Cheyenne. Why would they ever started a setup with not more room to go left?
Well, I didn't mind that, because it really was it evened everything up. It wasn't just a run and gun roping. It was it was a luck of the draw.
Yeah.
Anybody's game. It just depended on your luck that day, because, you know, we talked to Guy Allen last night. He went, 19 years or some crazy thing. Right. He never won a check at Cheyenne until he did. Then he won them all.
Yeah.
But
it just looks like the steer ropers back then, in the early days, they would have laid it out a little more steer roper friendly.
Yeah, you'd think. They love steer roping up there.
Well, they do.
You know, there's a lot of good steer ropers from up there.
Yep.
A lot of good legacy families from up there.
Yep.
That that multi-generations of them were steer ropers.
Changing the direction a little bit, you started Hutchinson, went to McAllister. What got you to Pawhuska, Oklahoma? I want to really spend some time about Pawhuska, Oklahoma, because you are changing. I know, I don't know how to put it. We know the Pioneer Woman's done tremendous things for Pawhuska, but you're right there making a change in this community. And what got you here, then what got you so interested in doing what you're doing?
Well, this has always felt like a hometown to me. Pawhuska is the steer roping capital of the world.
Yes, sir. And if you haven't ever listened to a podcast or been to Pawhuska, Oklahoma, or been to the Ben Johnson, you won't quite comprehend what he's saying right here.
Right.
Because, I grew up 60, 70 miles west of here, and I got to see Sonny Davis. I got to see Shelt Webster. I got to see Everett Shaw, even though I never roped.
Mm-hmm, sure.
But I got to see those guys.
Right.
And got to see and feel the heritage and eat the fried chicken out before the rodeo. With the Holt and Payne sitting out there under a tree eating fried chicken that Miss Jane had made.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it don't get no more.
When I was a kid, my grandmother would always, along with some of the other wives, would make food, and they'd have a little tarp hanging off a trailer, and Everett Shaw and all those guys that's where they'd come eat, a little snack, maybe after the roping, maybe between the go-arounds or whatever. There was always potato salad and fried chicken and all that kind of stuff for the ropers, And
it makes you want to say, world, slow down.
Yeah.
You're missing some of the greatest times that any of us has ever had at things like this.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, it's just a real personal place to me.
Yep. And Lauren didn't hurt.
No, heck no. We were actually we were here all the time. This is the steer open capital of the world, and what a lot of people don't realize is they have a lot of steer opens around here too. So they have an association called the Osage Steer Open Club, and that's where you come as a young steer roper, learn the ropes, or that's where if you're a seasoned steer roper, that's where you come to bring your older horse, your newer horse that you're trying to get seasoned along, or just trying to get some competition runs on yourself. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of money to be made. Mm-hmm. At them, a lot of experience to be had.
Right.
At these ropings here, and they have them here. They've always, I don't even know when they started. You were a director for it.
Yeah, I was a director there in the mid-'80s, vice president and secretary, but they just started in there like 83 maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
They started out roping heifers with plastic horns, and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they used to have the finals at the Lazy E. So this is this is the steer open capital of the world, and this is where you come if you are a steer roper, or if you want to be a steer roper. Mm-hmm. I can guarantee you're going to come through this town. And I know everybody here almost. Right off the bat, I don't know how many people I know here before I ever moved here. It's a lot. Mm-hmm. Most of the people in this museum I knew before I moved here, or knew of. Mm-hmm. Anyway, most of them.
Sure.
I've stumbled on a lot of cool stuff.
Right.
But as far as building this, Charlie, I don't know. I'm crazy. I think I might be a little bit crazy.
When then along the lines, though, you met Miss Lauren.
Oh, yeah.
And how long you guys been married?
13 years.
13.
Right, almost.
And got 2 beautiful daughters. And I just like being around them because they know how to behave, and they got a very good mama.
Yeah, everything I have has came to me from a rope, Charlie. I was in town putting on they were just having an amateur rodeo here in town. They called me up, wanted me to bring the steers. So I brought a potload of steers. And we had steer roping and bulldogging and team roping. And then we had a big Osage County only roping. Unless you're a sponsor, and then you got a rope in it as you were a local. And I was supplying the steers for it. Her dad showed up to rope. And she had just graduated college, and she showed up to watch her dad. And we met each other that night. It was the craziest thing, and we haven't spent but a couple days apart since that night over 13 years ago. She quit her job right then, her summer job. She was running the pool here in Pawhuska, and she hit the rodeo trail with me for the rest of the summer, and then she became a school teacher.
Yeah.
Right in Barnsdall. Won teacher of the year.
Right.
Before I made her retire to go to work at our pawn shop.
So you started out really in business here in the pawn shop business, is that correct?
Oh yeah, I got so lucky. Like I said, everything that I have in life has came to me from a rope. Sorry. I met a guy here at the Osage Steer Open Club. He he had won the sea roping division for the year, and he bought his permit to go to some rodeos. And I'd entered a rodeo down in Bridgeport, Texas, just this side of Fort Worth, and I went and looked at the list of ropers and saw that Larry Stewart
You're right. He's
was
kind
entered
of
in Bridgeport, Texas.
He's kind of my neighbor at Stillwater.
This is the craziest thing. I'll tell you a funny Larry Stewart story. First time I ever met him. I'd met him a few times, but I'd never traveled with him anywhere. So he was entered there. I was entered there. I said, hey, can I ride with you to Bridgeport? Because I didn't have a truck that would make it to Bridgeport and back, probably a trailer either. And he said, well, sure. So me and my pregnant wife loads up with Larry and heads to Bridgeport. We unload at Bridgeport in the middle of the night, the slacks the next morning, and he gets this, it's one piece of a hobble, Charlie, and tied to a chain that's about 20 foot long, and he crawls underneath his trailer and hooks this chain to the axle of his trailer, and then takes this hobble that's on the other end of the chain and hooks it to his horse's front foot and throws in some hay on the ground there. So I've never seen that done before. To this day, I've only seen it done to maybe an elephant in the circus or something. I've never seen anyone do that to their horse. So, but the horse, it seemed like he'd done it. He's been in this predicament a time or two, and it didn't bother him near as bad as I thought it was going to bother him. But
Probably not.
I always wondered how the training process went for that.
Right.
To tie your horse up by the front foot with the shackle thing at the rodeo. I'm just never, to this day. I mean, I've traveled to rodeos every single way you can get there, and it kept my horse in every imaginable situation, I feel like, almost. And
But
I never thought about doing that until
never hobbled him to the trailer, though.
not by his front foot, not by one front foot. I've hobbled horses by two front feet,
Right.
but never one front foot. So I always had to wonder what the training session was like.
He was there the next morning, though, wasn't he?
No, the damn shackle came undone, but he done it several more times after that. And I didn't see the horse ever get in a storm until I tell you what, we were in Deadwood, South Dakota, eating a steak. We were up in the rodeo in Sturgis that night. After we roped, we went to Deadwood to have a little fun over there and get a call. We all went, rode up there with JP Wickett and a couple other guys. A whole bunch of us loaded up in a big stock trailer and went to Sturgis, South Dakota, because it was a quick turnaround back to Ben Johnson here. And they called Larry, different horse, but he tied him up on the end of his halter and threw some hay on the ground, and his horse got the lead rope underneath the corner of the trailer and broke his neck right there. We had to give him to the bear. We had to give him to the place where they feed the bears over there by Mount Rushmore.
Well,
And his name was Bear. What's the odds of that?
Well,
that's funny. But Larry helped you get into the pawn shop business. Is that
So, after I went to that first rodeo with Larry decided he wanted to enter all the rodeos for the rest of the year. So, asked me if I was willing to help him do that. I said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm planning on entering all the rodeos the rest of the year myself. And he had a truck that ran. I didn't. He had a good trailer. I didn't. So it was just a match made in heaven right off the bat, just for the vehicle reasons alone, and for me to get to see him shackle his horse up by one foot to see what might happen every evening when we got done with the rodeo. And that turned into us rodeoing for like 3 or 4 years together. Larry, he was a real trooper. He loved steer roping, loved the cowboy lifestyle, everything about it, the rodeo lifestyle. He was all about it, and didn't win a whole lot of money, but we had a whole lot of fun. And we were headed to Pendleton, Oregon one year. And this is after I'd done married Lauren, and I was here in Pawhuska, and I was just honestly, I was just barely getting by, Charlie. My wife was just a school teacher over here, and he hands me this book. And I said, what is this? It's a great big binder he had put together. And he said, well, that's everything you need to know to open a pawn shop right there, Cody. I said, Larry, I can't open a lemonade stand on the corner. What are you talking about? And he said, well, you know, a few months ago you said the pawn shop closed in Pawhuska, and you thought you could make it go in the pawn shop business, you know, with your trader background. He believed in it. And I said, well, thank you, Larry. I'll read this book, and, you know, I'll consider opening a pawn shop. Thank you. He said, well, I'm not only going to give you this book. I said, I want to be your partner in this pawn shop. He said, I just believe 110% in you. And boy, howdy, we opened the pawn shop. And holy moly, the first year I was open, I would have a line of people. 10 o'clock every morning, you know, 5 or 6 people waiting on me to open the pawn shop to do business that day. So it was really great. And after a few years of the pawn business, he said, you know, if something's ever happened to me, I want you to be okay. If you'll just buy me out for what I've invested in this, that would suit me just fine. So this building you're sitting in was a pawn shop. This whole building, this room we're sitting in was my pawn shop room. This is where I stored all the TVs and Pendleton blankets and things that I had in pawn.
And if they haven't been here, now it's full of Ben Johnson pictures and memorabilia and Drummond Ranch memorabilia right in the same room.
Oh yeah. It's this whole thing over here. It's weird. I feel weird every time I walk into the museum that, you know, it don't seem real, like we really built this. It doesn't. It really still doesn't register to this day, after coming in here at least 1,000 times. So.
As a little kid, I remember coming in here with my grandmother shopping. It was a Safeway store.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Before that, it was a car dealership, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is an old historic building. Yeah, it's been around a long time. Sure. It was a skating ring upstairs.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I still got the skating ring and the yellow tape.
Yeah. Well, my earliest memory of the Safeway, but don't know what it was. Well.
Of course, you grew up here and spent your whole life here, Jimbo. That's correct? Yes, sir.
Right.
So, well, I enjoy your podcast and you being here, not only your history and knowledge of rodeo, but the heart and spirit you have for Pawhuska and the rodeo and the Western way of life. So you two are just a natural fit, and I enjoy listening to you, and that's one reason I wanted to do this with Cody, so people can know a little more about his background. And you talk about you don't really know how it happened. Some of the great things that happen in life is when we're in a zone and we don't even remember hardly how. You probably, the best roping you ever went to, you don't remember hardly roping that day.
Oh, I remember a few of them, but you mainly remember the ones that you drop the ball on for sure, Charlie.
But when you're in that zone, there's just such a feeling about things going on, and
yeah, I just feel like this was almost a calling in life for me. It's crazy to say, but
when did you get the idea of the museum?
Well, I had the idea, and I told a few people the idea. I said, I'm gonna open this big cowboy museum right here in the back of my pawn shop, everybody. And that's about the time everyone had stopped listening to me, Jimbo. And boy, howdy, I had heard of your grandpa. I didn't know you. And I went to go pick some stuff up from his house. I had a monthly auction here in town for the auction, just some old stuff, garage sale type stuff. And I drove under that Snively Ranch and saw the steer roper up there, and it clicked. This is Jim Snively's old place, and Jimbo happened to be there. And I told him about it. And he immediately went and got his granddad's scrapbook, an Uncle Joe's scrapbook, and started showing me everything. He was just so excited. He was he's honestly the guy that helped me make my mind up. I don't know if I ever told him that, but he's the only guy that didn't treat me like I was, crazy, which it sounds crazy. I don't blame him, honestly, because it did sound kind of crazy talking about it in hindsight. But he didn't take me as crazy because he had the same passion for this as I did, Charlie.
And I could see your passion, when you were serious.
And I hadn't always had this long hair, and beard and all that. So, and
you knew it wasn't.
He looked beyond all that for sure because he didn't know me.
But I knew you weren't in it for the money either.
Yeah.
I knew you genuinely loved the Western, and you wanted to honor these old guys.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't this isn't making
right.
Right. It's probably costing me more money every day than it brings in, but it just brings more joy to me and right.
Everybody else
everyone else that comes in it anyway.
In the planning stages, did you give thought to calling it the Osage Cowboy Museum? Kinda.
I did. I didn't know how. I did give that thought. Yeah, it was. I'd give it the Cowboys of the Osage real heavy thought. I never told Jimbo that, but yeah, we almost named the museum Cowboys of the Osage. But it really bugged me that we didn't have something, in Ben Johnson's name here in town. It just ate at me. We didn't really have a sign coming into town for anybody. We have all these world champions, including Ben Johnson, the only man to ever win a Academy Award in a rodeo world championship. I mean, that's big time stuff.
Absolutely.
In our way of life, for sure. And a lot of these guys, when we opened it up, they pointed at Justin Patterson. Well, I didn't know that guy was a world champion cowboy.
Right.
He's this crazy guy that runs in the post office without his shirt on.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that happened. And then when we opened it up, a lot of guys would come in and they would, a lot of grown men, hardened ranchers, hardened rodeo cowboys, it would just flood back a bunch of memories for them, and they'd start crying. So I knew we did something right for some people,
Absolutely.
Sure. It amazed me you talked about people just bringing stuff in here just out of the blue, just stuff walking in the door, that you never expected.
Well, just as good as anybody, Jimbo, there's not a lot of places that honor our way of life like this. Your granddad, world champion cowboy, one of the originals in the Turtles, and how long after his death did it take you to get him in the Cowboy Hall of Fame?
I know it, and I know this museum had a lot to do with that.
Well, I don't know about that, but
I absolutely do, because he was kind of forgotten.
There's a lot of these guys that were kind of forgotten, and they don't need to be forgotten. I mean, G.H. Louise winning the world championship, to me in rodeo, what's the difference in a Super Bowl ring or
Right.
World Series trophy? There's really not.
In our world, it's just as big.
Well, it is just as big,
Yeah.
and it ought to be just as big to everybody else too.
Right.
How many countries or states, or do you keep enough record to know, have come through the museum now? But 3 years?
Yeah.
Are we 3 years into it?
Yeah, we're over 3 years into it now. Just about everybody in the whole United States continental has been here, including Alaska. I don't know if we've had any Hawaiians here or not. We've had people that's been to Hawaii, if that's count. In countries, holy moly, that would be interesting. We right when we kicked this museum off, the COVID plague followed right after that. So, that wasn't real good on tourism itself. So, I mean, this thing was just sitting here accumulating bills for quite some time, and not seeing anybody come through it, Charlie. So
Something about museums, they tell me, I took a tour at Oklahoma City at the Cowboy Western Heritage Center and Museum, and they said the averages are 10 to 12% of the inventory is on display, and they run 12 to 14%. I was in Amon Carter one time, and they had 1,500, 2,000 items out, and they had 12,000 or 15,000 items. And this is the thing that Cody's got, is a big part of what he has is out. And that's why I think we will see in the years to come an expansion of this, because there's so much stuff available that families want to see, that the people want to see that come through here. And so we don't know where. I don't think Cody knows where this thing's really going to go.
Yeah, we're still in the wild west of this deal, Charlie. You know, a year ago, this room didn't have but a handful of pictures on the wall. You know, now we're working on it every day still.
When you first opened the museum, this room wasn't even open.
Now this was just we're still under construction over here, and I didn't even know
what it was going to be.
What it was going to be. I didn't know if we could, add this to make it a wing to the museum. I've never built a museum before.
Right.
I've never been in the museum business in any form or fashion. I just, I don't know.
Who is doing so? Are you or Lauren doing all the promotion on Facebook of the museum on about daily basis?
That's about the only thing I can do good, Charlie. I'm not good on the Facebook, but holy moly, somehow I got a knack for advertising. I can get the word out on certain things.
Yes, sir.
Well, I didn't go to any school for it, but I did work for some pretty big companies in their advertising department. So it definitely helped me.
Well, you do a great job.
Now to get the word out. But, my wife, she's great. She's a natural magnet. People love her. Can't figure out why I'm with her. It's just...
Another thing in the midst of this that you've started is the Ben Johnson Days Ranch Rodeo. I'd like to talk to you about that a little bit. It's had 2 very successful years, WRCA Ranch Rodeo.
Yeah, I've never really... The crazy thing is, I've only been to a couple ranch rodeos in my life, Charlie. I've been to every other kind of rodeo. So, that's... I was thinking what our community needed, and we're a ranching community, and a big part of our ranches, they have a ranch rodeo team, just like, we're a steer roping community, and we have a bunch of good steer ropers here. So we were just wanting to add to the week of Ben Johnson Memorial Steer Roping and the Cattlemen's Convention and add a ranch rodeo, but I didn't want to add they already had a ranch rodeo. It was like a locals ranch rodeo on them. I think it was on Friday night before the Ben Johnson. And I had heard that Claremore, which is a WRCA approved ranch rodeo, was not going to have it anymore.
That's a Working Ranch Cowboys Association.
Yes, sir.
Their home office is in Amarillo.
And, through the years, they've tried to get one of these approved rodeos in Pawhuska. Never could, because you can only have so many of them in a geographical region, so you're not stepping on Claremore's toes with their rodeo. And then, on top of that, you're only allowed to have so many a year. So with those 2 factors at play, it was over 20 years, they kind of gave up on trying to have one here, because who would have ever thought Claremore, a great facility, great thing, would stop having one there. So I heard that, and I immediately got on the phone with them, over a year in advance of this thing, of our first one. And, I called the WRCA every week, because I couldn't understand in my mind why they couldn't go ahead and approve my rodeo, and so I could go ahead and get started on getting it to be the #1 ranch rodeo in the nation. So I didn't hear until the end of January, 1st of February the next year, that they had approved Pawhuska, and I just read it on the website on their schedule. Started getting calls from people wanting to enter the ranch rodeo, and then the ranch rodeo was in June, so I was pretty well behind the 8 ball on the first one. reached out to Charlie to add a world-class trade show right with it. And Charlie, if you don't know him, he's a board member of the National Bit and Spur and Saddle Collectors, and he auctioneers the Prix de West art sale at the Cowboy Hall of Fame. It's something in Western Heritage or something, but to me it's to be the Cowboy Hall of Fame.
That's the way I know it.
You know, he auctioneers that, so he's a pretty prominent guy in our industry. He's on the Cowboy Channel all the time. I see him. He's getting famous.
Yep.
He's threatening to start his own podcast pretty soon. I think it'll be great. Everybody be listening for it. But anyway, you know, he's someone I knew. He's one of the best in the business. So I just asked him if he would do the trade show, and he happily did it for a couple of years for us and help us get it launched off the ground. And, you know, the first year we probably had $1 million worth of bits and spurs sitting in there. That's saying something.
That is.
So, you know, hopefully it grows every year. That's the name of the game.
Right. Just get a little bigger every year.
We want to be the Cheyenne of ranch rodeos before it's all said and done.
Why not? Right in the middle of Osage County. What better place?
Yeah, we're the only, I think one of the only ones we didn't hold any money out of any of the contestants that entered. Mm-hmm. We paid 100% of the money back because, you know, being a rodeo guy myself, you know, I think that's the right thing to do for these guys.
Yeah. And not living in Osage County, being from Stillwater, but to come to a meeting up here, we're going to start the rodeo. Well, I'll go get this sponsor. And then I'm in on the emails and the text is, well, I got so-and-so for $500. I got so, and this thing just pretty near sponsors itself. Mm-hmm. To see the way this community steps in and supports their own, like but I know
the first year they sponsored it really good.
Right.
This last year, you know, I don't know what it was. I think that there's a lot of things going on that week. Mm-hmm. I had a little bit of trouble. I mean, this last year, I was on the hook for over $20,000 if nobody showed up to watch it, because that's how far in the hole we were before the first night's performance, actually. Right. So, you know, but I didn't want to do, pardon my language, you know, I didn't want to try to do a half-assed one, so I tried not to spare any expense, you know, trying to put on a top-notch show. I think it still ended up losing $2,000, but that's way better than $20,000 at the end of the day.
Right. It was a first-class show, though.
Yeah, I mean, you can only do so much for a ranch rodeo, and we did all we could with what we were working with, for sure.
When you turn teams away, the word's out how good it is.
Yep.
And the thing about it is a trade show, and I did tell Cody that I'd not like to get somebody to cover it this year, but I'm not going to leave him hanging. I'll probably be there doing it. But this is an experience. And I was in Cheyenne, Wyoming this past weekend to a collector's show. We had so many more people come through Pawhuska Ranch Rodeo Show than we did this show in Cheyenne. But Pawhuska is an experience. It's a destination. You go, and I'm not saying anything negative towards the Oklahoma Cattlemen's Ranch Rodeo, but for a lot of those people, especially out of the city, they come to a ranch rodeo, and that's the experience. But when you come to Pawhuska, you got to get the whole plate. You just don't eat the taco. You got to get the enchilada, the beans, and the rice, and the chips and salsa, and that's what people come to Pawhuska for. You know, Ben Johnson weekend, the ranch tour, the steer opens, 3 days of them. What goes on at the theater, the Pioneer Woman. There's so many things to experience, and people comes here for the whole thing. And this ranch rodeo that Cody's doing, to me, is really the whipped cream and the cherry on top of the ice cream. And
it was a lot of work, but I had a lot of help when it came down to actually pulling the rodeo off the last couple of years. Yeah. So it was a lot of work leading into it, but it was all worth it for sure.
Tell us about your store down on the highway.
You know, a couple of years after I moved here, Charlie, my mother-in-law went to a book signing downtown Pawhuska. Reed Drummond, the pioneer woman, was signing a cookbook she wrote. And everyone was kind of talking, she's blogging and this and that. I didn't know what a blog was. But her deal just really started to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow to where, she's one of the number one television shows in the world now, Charlie. And 4 or 5 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, she started talking about, she had already had the number one selling product at Walmart. So I started just taking a little bit of notice of her because I was in business in town. Had a lot of people coming through town asking about her, just stopping in the pawn shop. Do you know Reed Drummond and the Pioneer Woman and this and that? Because her television show was out for a long time before she built this deal here. And, I started looking around at her. We kind of took for granted, all us locals around here. Barely call myself a local, but I will now. All us locals around here, we just kind of took her for granted. Saw her at the football games, and I saw her in the grocery store all the time, and I didn't realize how famous she was becoming. Internationally famous. And then right around that same time, my wife was watching this show called Fixer Upper about this couple from Waco. And they had opened this big deal down there called the Silos.
Right.
And we had been hearing all about it. This is before the deal here in town opened. And I said, you know what? We need to go down there and look at that, because I heard rumor that this Pioneer Woman lady is fixing to open up something, and probably the only way to get a true feel for what's fixing to happen to us is go down there and then divide it by 10, since we're not on a I-35. Let's just see what's going on. We went down there, and people were parking 20 blocks away, walking in, trying to get there. It was still the Wild West down there. It was all unincorporated around where those silos are. There wasn't anything there, but there were tens of thousands of people coming every day. Tens of thousands of people coming every day. Actually, Waco was dying out, and they revitalized that town like no other. And I knew instantly that I needed to go check out the Duck Dynasty people right then. I knew instantly. I said, well, let's go see what these guys are up to. Their show's not on TV anymore. Let's just see what their traffic's like. Well, they're still seeing record crowds to this day. People make pilgrimages down there to see them. And I went and visited quite a few other little places like that. People that were on TV that was opening a destination place. And I done decided, if thousands of people come to see the American Pickers, little old town in Iowa, that something major was fixing to happen here. So we had been looking at a few products anyway, but wondered how the heck we were going to incorporate them and sell them in our pawn shop, metal flamingos and stuff like that. I saw them at Cheyenne, bought my wife some metal headdress or something, some cactus up there after I wanted some money. And we knew we wanted to add some of these products that were fun. But just being a small pawn shop in Pawhuska, we were barely making it anyway. Actually, before she came along, I was fixing to shut this thing down and only be open here about once a week in Pawhuska. And I was fixing to open a new pawn shop in Collinsville or Skytook. I just made an offer, on a piece of property, right there at the stoplight, Skytook, where all the highways meet. Sure. I was moving my pawn shop there where that old tire shop was on the corner. Luckily, I found out it was in a floodplain right there, and they hadn't let me out of the deal. And I told Lauren, I said, this is going to sound crazy. I said, but we need to open a new division of our store right now, right here in our pawn shop, and selling all these metal animals because they're cool. And I think I know where to go buy them, is what I told her. I said, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure. So we loaded up I went and borrowed a trailer from my dad, borrowed my father-in-law's pickup, and I didn't tell anyone, we drove to Mexico, and big old pocket full of money. Thought it was a pocket full of money. $9,000. And we bought a trailer load of flamingos and cactuses and toucans and I don't know, monkeys and palm trees and big feet, things like that. And we just added it to our pawn shop. And we said, well, we got to call it something different. And one of our daughters is a ballet. One of our daughters thinks she's a cowgirl. So somehow we settled on the name Bucking Flamingo. Kind of a cowboy in an elegant thing. I mean, it's the only Bucking Flamingo in the whole world.
Right.
And, it was a hit right off the bat. All the locals loved it. And pretty soon, we had people coming from all over. And I said, let's turn the whole back into a big Bucking Flamingo warehouse back here. So the whole back, I mean, most of my pawn shop turned into Bucking Flamingo warehouse, front, back. And I'll be darned, Pioneer Woman people started coming in town. And at that time, it was pretty wild. They had to stand in line to get their place in line. There wasn't any making a reservation or come put your name on a list. You stand in line. Yeah. And people stood in line for 2 blocks deep in blizzards. 6 days a week. And a lot of them made their way. We're not on any kind of main street right here, hardly, where the museum is now. But a lot of people, word got out. Well, take that back. It was kind of hard getting them over here, Jimbo. So
I remember the old guy used to sit up on the
I hired a guy, ended up being a convicted murderer. He stood on the corner and waved them in. And people loved him until they found out he's a convicted murderer, and not as many people loved him after that. And I was still kind of having trouble getting the amount of people I wanted over here in. So I had this big old Cadillac back in pawn, old pretty much piece of junk Cadillac, and we threw a couple shotguns on the hood, and I went and had it vinyl wrapped, and it had 6 shooters on the doors and great big horns on it. And then I had bought a 1930s horse trailer at an auction just because I thought I liked the nostalgia of it, and put it on the back of that Cadillac and had it all hand painted up, Bucking Flamingo, world famous. And then I have a great big flamingo in the back with a saddle in it. It looks like you're just hauling around a 10-foot flamingo with a saddle on it in a horse trailer, kind of. And all these people were lined up for blocks both ways. So down Main Street and down Kahika Street. And about every 30 minutes, I'd start driving the pawn shop / flamingo rig around the block with animal sounds playing. And I eventually settled on just a mooing sound, which I still use to this day on the current flamingo.
It gets their attention, when that thing, and then they hear that noise, everybody looks up.
So that changed the game for me. People, as soon as they saw the flamingo pawn shop rig, they had to come check that deal out. So they'd make their way over here a few blocks back off in town here and find, the original Bucking Flamingo / Big County Pawn.
Right.
So it was pretty wild, and I got to thinking, man, I got to get this flamingo deal moved, Jimbo. So I would, I just kept an eye out for a place on Main Street. And I happened to be watching the news one night. In the Masons, they own the Bucking Flamingo building that I'm currently in. They were having a contract dispute with the lady that was down there. They were raising her rent or something from $400 to $700 a month. But anyway, she was mad at them, and she was moving out, having her final moving sale and this and that. So I called the Masons right then. I was like, well, if you're not going to end up making a deal with her, I'd like first shot at this building, please. And they gave me first shot, and I said, I'll tell you what, I'll just give you $1,000 a month, because it's worth it in location for me, and that way we don't have to contract dispute, nothing. We just go right into business. So I moved it over there, and I kept wondering what I was going to do with this building when I moved it over there, because I'd shrunk the pawn shop down to not a very big pawn shop anymore, because we're selling more flamingos than we were fishing licenses and stuff.
Right.
So I just had the bright idea one day we were going to build us a True Blue museum back here. I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to do it or anything, Jimbo. Seriously, until you gave me the confidence to do it that time. But until that day, I didn't know, and I didn't know how it was going to be. And I was driving to Denver one day, and it just dawned on me that I can't venture outside of Osage County. I cannot venture outside of Osage County because there's too much here. There's too much Western history here. Pawhuska / Osage County, in my personal opinion, professional museum curator opinion, it needs to be in the same breath as Tombstone, Arizona, or Fort Sumner, Arizona, where Billy the Kid ran, or Deadwood, South Dakota, Cheyenne, Wyoming. We need to be in the same breath as all these guys when you're thinking about your true blue historic Western towns. I mean, we had all the outlaws here. Indian Territory. We were Indian Territory, so the only ones that outlast us, were the Arizonas and the New Mexico territories out there. So the Billy the Kids, and we had way more outlaws than they had. All the famous ones hid here through the years.
So there's no law.
We have you had to be federal lawman to step foot on here, and they only had a handful of them out of Fort Smith.
Right.
Bass Reeves and the old hanging judge.
He couldn't cover the whole state,
couldn't cover the whole state. So, we have all those. And, the King Ranch and the 4-6 ranches and all that's all fine and dandy, and I'm glad that they're all still running to this day in some form or fashion. But you know what? We had the Chapman Barnard Ranch. We have the Drummond Ranch.
Had the
Mullendore, very famous ranch, So you look at our ranching history, second to none. Then you want to look at our craftsmen from around here. Holy crud. I don't know if his first shop, because it's in dispute right now, but in Oscar Crockett's writings, his first shop's in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and that shop was across the street from here.
Right.
And I don't know if anyone's familiar with him. They should be, if they're not. He revolutionized the bit and spur business, and still one of the biggest names. Well, anyway, you can be an entry-level collector and get an Oscar Crockett and get a Crockett piece, or you could be a advanced collector and get an early Crockett piece, and everywhere in between. That's a big name.
Sure.
That's a huge name in our industry.
I had a interesting find this weekend at Cheyenne, a pair of Crockett spurs that's in an early catalog that still had the original blue, kind of a gun blue colored. And a lot of people think, and one guy said, "Are those fake?" No, they're not fake. They made them that way, probably came out of the 30s, never been worn, still had the blue on them,
Well, a lot of people don't realize, as his career and company progressed, they started mass manufacturing, but they were all blacksmiths to start out with. He was. And they employed a crew of blacksmiths, some of the best in the world.
And the quality was always there to the end. There's always cowboy tough, and
well, you look at all these old real cowboy stuff. A lot of them wore a pair of Crockett spurs. A lot of them did, and all the way up to this day, you can look at our cowboy craftsmen. We got the TCA member Jay Adcock. There's only 13 guys in the whole world that sit in that deal. So. And he's one of the only raw hide braiders in it that's from America. There's a French guy in it, a couple South Americans.
I remember.
It's pretty unbelievable. Blucher Boots. What about that, Charlie? That's from our area. It moved from Cheyenne to Olathe to here.
To Fairfax, yes.
Yes, sir.
Right, and I remember coming in here in the 60s to Arthur Shepard's saddle shop here in Pawhuska, about a block from where we're sitting, and made wonderful saddles, great craftsmen.
Well, all the top cowboys in the day rode a Shep if you're a roper.
Yeah.
But before the Fred Lowrys came along.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe after the Fred Lowrys come along, he probably used a lot of Fred Lowry trees in that deal.
Yeah.
You know, he's a famous craftsman. You know, John Israel, we got him, famous you know. And then the rodeo cowboys, that's what sold me. That's what sold me, you know. I'm all about the rodeo cowboy. You guys know that. And, you know, I don't know everything about rodeo, but a lot. That's all I know.
Right.
I went to Cheyenne more times than my dad just because I never missed one from the year I was born to, you know, I went a few times after he retired. So you know, that's all I know is the rodeo life, the rodeo way of life. And I got to looking around. Heck, besides the best ropers in the world, and some of the best bronc riders and bull riders, and the first rodeo clown at the first national finals rodeo, you know, we got the #1 rodeo act in the world on top of it all right here, still going. You know, it's holy moly, it gets me fired up, Jimbo.
I know.
I tell you something, though, in talking about this, that maybe a section of pictures anyway, or a display, is the great horses of Osage County that's really gets overlooked, and Jimbo knows as well as anybody about the great horses of Osage County.
Right.
A person could write a book about that, the great horses of Osage County, Oklahoma.
Yeah, you know a horse, I just read an article the other day, Charlie, and it sounds crazy. I didn't know about all this, but, you know, the Pride of Pawhuska, Leo spent more time here than he spent anywhere. The great horse Leo, right here in Pawhuska, the majority of his life. Well, that's really something.
Most people timed to Bud Warren at Perry, but that was after the fact, wasn't it?
He was owned several times here by a few different people right
Yes.
here. And, you know, I saw a picture the other day, Joe Hancock running in a quarter horse race right here at our track
Yeah.
himself.
Whether it's rope horse, race horse, or
Polo horses?
movie horses that Ben Johnson took to California, or to polo horses that Tommy Wayman took out of here, it just goes on and on.
Hey, we got national cutting horse champions.
Yeah.
Horses.
Right.
And men right here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just an unbelievable amount of successful cowboys and great Westerners, great Western way of life people.
You didn't mention John Free or Jim Hamilton either. You know,
I ain't even
that's
got to the artist.
Yeah.
I ain't even got to the artist. You know, Jim Hamilton, he did the big sculpture down on the University of Texas's campus. He did the big sculpture on the Oklahoma State campus. He helped start the Post Steer Roping and Art Sale out there. And then John D. Free, you know, how many people made their life and living solely from art that you know? Personally, Charlie, without any other way of making a living and employing other people in the deal.
Right. No.
Making art.
raising a big family.
They all work there, including Dreama that works for me to this day, worked for John for 19 years. You know, to make yourself a living, all your kids a living, their families a living, all by the art you make. They were all just pouring the art that he was making. The foundry, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, to me, there's not very many people. There's a lot of artists out there. A lot of people that think they're artists.
Starving
artists. A lot
artists.
of people that are good artists that, you know, very, very few people take the risk in life to do that for their way of life.
Mm-hmm.
But he was the best at a horse anyway. I mean, nobody, I don't think Charlie Russell could do a horse better than John D. Free himself.
Yeah.
Cody, I'll share this. When you sold Jim Hamilton's estate, you remember I had left you an order to buy a spur ashtray.
Oh yeah.
When I go to a show, if it's not for sale, I leave it at home. I'm not one of these people when I go to a collector's show or a trade show. Well, I just brought it along. No, I don't do that. But
You know why? Because he'd probably end up selling it while he's gone.
But this ashtray came out of Jim Hamilton's auction when Cody had it, and on the back of it, it's got its JH brand, and it's probably an inside Mark Crockett, very early one, that they made into an ashtray, and I stick my business cards in it. And that is one thing that people look at and say, is that for sale? No, it's not for sale. That's my card holder.
Yeah.
And I deeply cherish that. I rode with his brother up at Grainola. I've been in their house, and a wonderful house up on the hill here. But it's just a really special thing to me, and so...
I think about that thing every night before I go to bed, just knowing I could have got Charlie to give more money for it now that I know how special it is to him, Jimbo.
He was a nice guy. I remember him as a kid.
Yeah.
But no, that's
You know, just little things like that, you know, it's just part of our lifestyle, and things like that tie us together.
yeah, underneath all this long hair, don't be mistaken, the cowboy way of life is the only way of life for me, Charlie. And I want to see it flourish. I want everybody to remember where they came from. I want everybody to remember these great people and the great things they've done. I mean, the only way I can even describe how all this came about, is maybe like the Field of Dreams or something.
Yeah.
Because something in the back
That's
of my
what it
head told
reminds
me I
me
had
of.
to do it.
Especially the way that stuff just walks in
And,
the door.
it's crazy. We didn't hire a bunch of contractors. I had to get an electrician to hook some stuff up, but me and a couple other, I used to call them a couple of hippies, but I'm going to call them a couple other hippies, a couple other fellow hippies. We did all the work in it.
Oh, yeah. I used to come in here when they were working. They'd
That's
just
so
be
crazy.
just busy as beavers, back there.
And a lot of it is a little crude around the edges, but
Oh, it looks good.
it's a lot better than I, could have ever dreamed it could turn out.
Right,
I mean, it doesn't seem real when we walk in here to this day. I mean, I said that a couple times, but it's the truth.
Right.
It's but we can't let people forget about this stuff, Charlie.
Jimbo, before we wrap this thing up, is there anything else you want to add or share with
just-
the listeners?
He's been listening for a while.
Yeah. No, I just want to thank Cody for what he's doing for Pawhuska. It wasn't his hometown. I mean, original hometown, but it is now. And Pawhuska loves him. We love him. I consider him a very, very good friend, and just really appreciate what he's done for all these Cowboys, and Pawhuska as a town,
And I walked in here tonight, Jimbo, considering him a good friend, but I've learned so much about his heart and his passion for this that, I'm so glad we've done this, and I hope people listening appreciate it as much as I do. And I just thank you for letting me have your chair for one night.
Oh, yeah.
And I appreciate your heart, because everywhere I go, I'm involved with people who love the Western way of life. I mean, that's just who we are and what we are. And you feel sometimes that you're getting pushed, kind of shoved out the door when you look at the world around us. But at the end of the day, we're still Cowboys. And we still love the Western way of life, and nobody's going to take it away from us. That's who we are. And I call it a spirit. We have a spirit of the West that's just part of us. And
Yeah, we got to keep it alive. That's for sure.
so I want
if I could, I'm sorry, Charlie.
No, go ahead.
But the only thing, all this stuff's fine and dandy we've done around here, but if I was going to give somebody a little bit of piece of advice, it's great to have some fun. I mean, I had more fun than anybody, but sometimes you might ought to think about your actions, before you do them, or something you're going to say to someone before you say it. I never made the smartest decisions, back in my younger days, but if you keep that in the back of your mind a little bit,
Amen.
your life will go a lot easier, for you in the long run as you get older. I've had a lot of hurdles to overcome just on I didn't have a bad reputation, but I didn't have a great reputation either one, Charlie. You know?
Well, it takes quite a man to sit here and share that advice.
Well,
and I applaud you for doing it.
You know, you got to learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
And, heck, we're all here to learn a little bit, so.
And I appreciate the phone calls once in a while just to check in and kind of encourage one another too. So.
Well, someone's going to call you every now and then, Charlie.
But it's anything else we want to share before we wrap this up here tonight? I hope you've listened to every podcast, or this may be the first one, and you may never have been to Pawhuska, but I pray that after you listen to this, you'll want to come to Pawhuska. You'll want to see the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum, because there's belt buckles, there's saddles, there's trophies, there's pictures, there's displays of Ben Johnson, the one-armed bandit. And rawhide of J.
We don't have a lack of stuff to look at here.
It just goes on and it's first class in the presentation. Cody's got the great retail store over here, the Buck and Flamingo, and there's not a prettier drive than there is between here and Burbank, Oklahoma. There's not a prettier place in the world, especially in the spring.
Any way you come into town, Charlie, you can't beat it.
And you can go north to the. In fact, when we was at the Ranch Rodeo on Thursday night, I took a friend of mine who had never been in the circle on the tall grass. He was blown away by that tour up through there to see the buffalo, the cattle, the jackrabbits, the deer. And we just had a great evening touring up through there. So it's a destination point once again. You will not be disappointed, not only in Pawhuska, but in Osage County. One thing let's touch on right quick is the movie that's fixing to come out.
Yeah.
It was filmed here.
Uh-huh.
You got to see that firsthand.
Holy moly, it almost seemed like it was just everyday life around here after a while. So right across the street here, Charlie, they kept all the wagons and the horses and things like that when all the livestock was just kept right across the street in that grass patch when they were filming in town. They turned all of our historic streets back to dirt streets, and then they put 1920s telephone poles there, and then, they didn't use any CGI or green screens, so they built every set from scratch. It's going to be a wild deal. It's one of the highest budgets in Hollywood history right here in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. It's got the star power behind it. Leonardo DiCaprio is the headliner, and Robert De Niro is his co-star, and Jesse Plemons, which I think they're favoring that guy to win an Oscar pretty soon, it seems like.
Yeah.
Lily Gladstone, Barry Corbin, Brendan Fraser, and then it's directed by the great Martin Scorsese. Just his name alone, brings a lot. Heck, I like some Martin Scorsese movies. Goodfellas.
Oh yeah.
Casino, that was a good one.
Yeah.
I love Casino.
Yeah, I did too.
And Charlie, it's going to be hard for him to mess it up. It's based on a true story. The Osage Indian murders right here and the birth of the FBI. It's such a fascinating story. 1920s, long story short. And Jimbo, he can help me out a little bit with this. The Osage Indians, overnight, became the richest people in the world. The only way, and it was from their minerals, oil. Just right at the turn of the century when everybody's still riding a few horses, a lot of cars on the road. It's just, still the Wild West. No one knows for sure if, cars are here to stay. Horses are gone, no one knows. So they're categorizing it, I think, as a Western. But anyway, these Osage people, they became the richest people in the world overnight. They were driving Rolls Royces and Pierce Arrows around here. And it was all because of the mineral rights. And, they were smart enough in the early days to retain the mineral rights. They knew somehow, all this was going to be worth something. And, it's written into their laws that, no one else can ever have the mineral rights besides the Osage Nation here. So, with great wealth comes great greed. Always does. So, basically what first happened, the whole town, from what I've researched and read, turned into lawyers, doctors, things like that, because they've decided, these Osage people, they're too dumb. If you got so much blood in you, you're savage, you can't take care of all this money. That's what they're thinking. So if you were an upstanding citizen and you went and petitioned somehow or form, I mean, it'll all be shown in the movie, well, they'd put you in charge of an Osage's money. So there were a lot of greedy things happening. I think, and don't hold me to any of these numbers, but your average funeral is about $500 back then, and they were charging Osages $5,000. Their car would run out of gas or have a minor problem, and the dealership would tell them, you got to buy a new car, and everybody was in on it. It was a pretty tragic thing. And then it progressively got worse. So the book, it tells a story kind of about just one family, but it probably happened to more than one.
Right.
I don't know for sure, but they started marrying these Osage women and going ahead and having full families with them, Charlie. And I know you know the story, but they go ahead and have full families with them, and I don't know how many kids some of them had with them, and they started killing the women they were married to,
or their heirs,
and their whole family off,
so that their wife would inherit the whole enchilada, let's say, and then eventually they had planned to kill the wife too, probably.
Yep. I mean, just a horrible story. They were trying to get word back to the Washington, D.C., I suppose, what I kept reading. And, anytime someone was going to go and say anything, they just simply throw them off the train between here and Oklahoma City, seemed like, or here in Washington, D.C., and that was the end of that. And it went on for quite a while. And, they were just a bunch of con men and ruthless gangsters, basically, doing this.
When do you expect this to be released?
May 2023 is what they're saying now, but they started off saying November this year, and then went to December, and then it went to January. Now it's in May next year. And my two girls made the cut, actually, and my goat.
Your goat.
If that goat makes the final cut when he finally meets his demise, we might have him bronzed, and definitely going to have him taxidermied and have him here in the museum, because we saved his movie check. We're going to have a whole display if he makes the cut. Gary the One-Eyed Goat.
Well, he's still alive now, though, isn't he?
Yeah, he's still alive.
Okay, you're not going to...
They said Leo paid him every day.
Really?
Surprised he wasn't kissing him. Who knows?
Well, let him die a natural death. Don't hurry it along.
I ain't going to hurry it along. He's too busy. He's getting a big head over there. Sometimes we bring him into town, let him see the public. He's almost a celebrity around here. So I think for the last 3 years running, he's won the 4th of July. The 4th of July, he's been Gary Washington. He's been Gary Uncle Sam. Mm-hmm. I think he was Abraham Lincoln this year.
Yep.
Well, gentlemen, this has been great. I mean, I'm so excited about people listening to it, not because of anything I've done, but just to hear the history and the passion about what we're all about. And I'm excited. Jimbo, anything before we wrap it up here?
No, I don't want to make Cody cry.
Yeah, so. I'm already crying, baby, it seems like. I mean, I haven't cried since my grandma died, it don't seem like, till tonight. Oh, no. But it's one of those deals.
We love you, Cody.
But I'm on. Finish that story real quick, Charlie, before we get off here.
Okay.
So they finally get someone that don't get thrown off the train back to Washington, D.C. to tell everybody what's going on here. And I'll be danged, the president didn't appoint a fella, Herbert Hoover? What, Hoover?
J. Edgar Hoover.
J. Edgar Hoover, to start a special branch of the government called the FBI to investigate federal crimes, because this was federal land still at the time. So, the FBI was essentially born over this whole Osage murder case. So, there's just so much history here especially on that side, even, the Cowboys, the Indians. Part of our Indians are Cowboys. We got people who's won the Indian Rodeo World Championships from here. So it's just such a melting pot of history around here, Charlie.
It's great. It's great.
We've affected every facet of American history around here, and just no one realizes it. They're fixing to, though, when this movie comes out.
Absolutely. It's going to be huge. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to be part of it. And maybe we'll think another brainstorm and do this again sometime.
All right. Well, thanks for coming up, Charlie. We appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you all. Wrap us up, Cody.
Tell them we'll see them next week, Charlie.
We'll be right back next week for another podcast on the Cowboys of the Osage, sponsored by the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum. One is released every Thursday. You can find it. They'll be posted on YouTube, and you can also find them on the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum Facebook page. And they're great, and they're very interesting. Thank you for being with us. God bless you.
Old stories like long lost friends, rodeos and late night bends, history before our time, round pens and pasture rides, Cowboys of the Osage.